had plenty of paranormal experiences from a young age, but I didn't believe in the paranormal. I passed it off as my brain playing tricks on me because I was always alone when it happened. That is, until 5 years ago. My cousin, male, and me, also male, were walking through the abandoned part of an old army fort from the 16th century in our hometown in Croatia. It was around 2:30 in the morning, and we decided to go there because we were bored, and it also provided a shortcut to our houses. There is an old tunnel that's around 30 meters long that serves as an exit from the fort. It is the only exit in the fort that had no lighting inside of it, as that part was not renewed. It was pretty creepy, but we thought, screw it, and went in. After a few meters in, I felt this feeling of overwhelming dread pass through me. We stopped dead in our tracks and looked at each other. He felt it too. Then came the sound that I can only describe as a deep shriek that travelled from the end of the tunnel towards us and ended up in our heads. We couldn't move because it hurt our ears a lot. We heard what I could compare to that sound from COD when a grenade explodes near you. After a few seconds, he looked up ahead and screamed. I could barely hear him through the buzzing, but I looked up too and saw a huge shadow, at least 3 times as tall as a human, standing at the end of the tunnel. We couldn't move or talk for what seemed like 2 minutes. We were just standing there, frozen in fear. Then, all of a sudden, the shadow started moving, imagine gliding towards us at the speed of fast walking. It came as close as 7 to 8 meters to us, and I honestly thought that we were about to die. Then, somehow, my cousin unfroze and pulled me with him in full sprint. We ran for 30 minutes without stopping until we reached our part of town, and we didn't look back the whole time. We both saw and heard the exact same thing. We slept in my place that night, covered in blankets over our heads like little pussies. And to this day, I can't explain this in any way. I used to be part of a search and rescue for Parks Canada, but that all changed after something I experienced in the foothills 3 years ago. The horror I witnessed is a juxtaposition to the beauty of the surrounding primal landscape. There is something special about this land which is difficult to explain. It's so peaceful. This whole area was considered to be a sacred place by the Aboriginal people. This area is inhabited by the mighty buffalo, grizzly bears, wolves, and mountain lions, among other prestigious animals. But there is something else that inhabits this land, something that has gone unseen for an incomprehensible amount of time. Dare I say that this thing must have witnessed a millennia go by. For all intents and purposes, I call it a vampire. And I don't mean a pale man with slicked back hair and a black cape with an Eastern European accent or anything. In a way, this thing seemed almost like a force that has gone unseen in the wilderness, feeding off of unwary travelers. What it does to its prey is not unlike things we see in nature. It feeds like a parasite to continue its existence. This is, of course, me trying to make some kind of sense of what I witnessed, to have some kind of grasp on the situation, to keep things in order. That year was chaos due to the severe electrical storms that caused multiple forest fires, some of which were under control while others caused massive damage in other areas. Health advisory services were recommending anyone with existing health issues remain indoors and avoid strenuous activity. But even that didn't keep the most rugged or determined outdoorsmen away. Oftentimes the sky was hazy, with billowing smoke that went on for miles, carried by the wind. There were fire bans set in place. Anyone caught with a fire at a campsite, or even a fire pit in their backyard, could earn them a hefty fine. Let me tell you about that day. Normally, it would have been a bright sunny day, typical of the season during that time of year. However, the sunlight was blotted out by the heavy smoke that arrived pre-dawn. The trouble started during the middle of summer that year when a park ranger came across a reserved campsite that was in ruins. There was debris scattered all around the site. The tents had been shredded open, and one was even completely collapsed. The car windows were smashed in, and the roof had been torn open. The wreckage clearly showed that there was some kind of struggle here sometime during the night. As it turned out, there was a family of 4 that had been using this campsite. It was a father and mother with 2 daughters. The ranger determined that it was likely a bear attack, and he called in for backup. The RCMP were called to the scene alongside search and rescue teams, and a massive search for the missing family commenced. The group I was with was about 10 miles south away from the campsite. That is how far out descent dogs brought us, but still, there was no sign of the family at all. How in the hell did we come all of this way without finding anything? There was no blood, no objects, nothing. There weren't even any footprints in the dirt, besides deer tracks. The area we ended up in was thick brush, dominated by brooding spruce trees and rocky cliffs. The canines started to act up. They began whining and howling with fright, tucking their tails between their legs, and hiding behind the dog handlers who were trying to control them. This was highly unusual. It's like they either saw or caught scent of something that they didn't like. But what was it? I was several meters behind the group who were arguing about the dogs and which direction to go. I kept glancing around because I started to feel anxious. Despite the summer heat, I had that strange sensation of someone walking over my grave, if you know what I mean. My whole body shivered, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up on end, and goosebumps formed on my skin. There was another feeling too, the indistinct feeling of being watched. I spun around, looking in every direction, looking at the trees and the rocks, but there was nothing of note to see. What happened next, I cannot truly explain. It was against procedure, but I felt compelled to start moving towards an old overgrown hiking trail in the southeast. I felt like I was being pulled by something unseen, but that notion didn't occur to me at the time. I just felt the need. Maybe I wanted to get away from the other search and rescue members who were arguing among each other with the tracking dogs going crazy or something. Beyond the thick brush, I discovered a cave entrance in the ground. At the cave mouth, I spotted something bright. It was a child-sized shoe with pink stripes on the sides of it. I felt my heart sink into my chest. I looked up at the smoky sky and let out a sigh. I noticed an opening in the dark hazy sky, and a beam of sunlight hit me in the face. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it into the opening in the ground. The sloping ground showed signs of something being dragged downwards. I let out a whimper as I entered the cave. I knew that there were caves in the area, but I had never actually gone into one alone. But as I stated, I felt like something was calling to me. That's honestly the only way that I can describe it. I had to crab walk through the entrance, but when I reached the flat ground, I could stand fully upright. 20 feet into the cave, and the stagnant air took hold, and the darkness was becoming oppressive, but I continued pushing forwards. I stopped and listened very carefully. There was only complete silence and the unforgiving darkness. I shined the light around the cavern and spotted something on the wall. It was an ancient petroglyph carved right into the cave wall. It depicted men chasing a buffalo herd off of a cliff. I traced my finger along the primitive art. Pushing onward into the unknown, I found an object on the cavern floor. It was what appeared to be a very old leather canvas bag. I picked it up and blew the dust off of it. I unbuckled it and took a look inside. There was a rusted water canteen, a bronze compass, a leather-bound book, and, to my surprise, a very old-looking pistol. In fact, I later found out that it was a flintstock pistol, which was dated to 1715. I dropped to my knees and grabbed the book out of the bag. The writing on the cover read, Les Démons. I remained still on my knees, trying to comprehend what I was seeing, trying to make sense when a noise startled me. It didn't sound like it was right next to me, but rather it came from somewhere deeper in the cave. It sounded like something being broken or snapped. I continued my search for the missing family. They had to be down here somewhere. The glow of the flashlight showed that I had to make my way down another slope, and at the bottom, I saw something that caused me to freeze. I saw a pair of feet, one barefoot, missing a shoe, the other wearing a white shoe with pink stripes. Tears began to well up in my eyes, and complete sadness had taken over me now. I had indeed found one of the missing family members, a young girl who couldn't have been older than 9. I gasped in horror at what I saw. First was the look of complete terror frozen on her face. There were horrible wounds on her necks and arms. She was completely white, as if the blood had been drained out of her. My heart was beating in my chest like a jackhammer. I was starting to have difficulty breathing. I began to shake, my fingers beginning to feel numb. There was more damage than just the apparent bite marks. Her head was at an odd angle. It was obvious that her neck was broken. The cold indifference of the universe blasted my mind, and I began to sob uncontrollably. I frantically reached for the only thing I could use to defend myself, something that worked against animals, my flare gun. If there was some kind of animal down here, I knew I could scare it off. A shuffling sound caused me to back up against the tunnel wall. Something was in here with me. Nausea began to take hold of me, and my mind felt like it was swirling. I was feeling cold, but sweat was running down my face now. With trembling hands, I summoned the courage to move the flashlight into the direction to the source of the sound. My sanity was holding on for dear life now. And when I saw the thing, I thought I was going to die right on the spot. The very sight of the being, if that's what you want to call it, the very knowledge that this creature may exist, it reached right down into the greatest depths of my psyche, right down into the primal fear that exists in all living things. I wanted to retreat, but I couldn't. And this is what I saw in that dark cave system. Have you ever read a National Geographic magazine or watched the Discovery Channel? If you have, then you're probably familiar with Otzi the Iceman, the man whose frozen corpse was frozen in a glacier for thousands of years in the Alps. That is what I could compare this being to. Its leathery discolored skin was pulled tight to its emaciated skeletal frame. Its mouth was filled with yellow razor-sharp teeth that dripped with blood. In fact, its mouth and chest were smeared with fresh blood. And this thing wasn't even looking at me. It was crouched on top of a pile of bodies that belonged to the rest of the missing family. The mother and the daughter had their throats torn out, as well as their necks broken. On top of the pile, directly beneath the creature, was the father who had the beast's face buried in his neck. Its eyes were closed as it drained the man of his blood. A terrible sucking sound came from the act, like that of a thirsty animal desperate for water. It withdrew its fangs from the poor soul's neck and proceeded to cruelly break it. It began to emit a strange guttural clicking, as if it was satisfied from its feeding. It slowly turned its head towards me, and its eyes snapped open. The eyes were like black marbles, but its pupils were red. Strange thoughts raced through my mind like, where did it come from? What were the things that it had seen throughout its inhuman existence? I felt like my mind was starting to slip. It began to stand upright, staring right at me, continuing to make that strange chattering sound. It took one step towards me, and the flare gun. I pointed it directly at the thing and pulled the damn trigger. There was a loud bang in the cave, and the entire room was lit up with a glowing red light. To my complete shock, the living nightmare was holding the burning flare in one of its hands. I retreated out of that cavernous room and bolted just as the creature let out a growl. This thing was going to kill me. I was just about to fall victim to it, just like that poor family. I ran as fast as I could, my body scraping against the cavern walls. I could see daylight just up ahead, the cavern entrance. I crawled up it as fast as I could, pushing my body to its limits. I spilled out onto the surface area, facing a bright blue sunny sky. The smoke had finally cleared, at least for now. The spruce trees gently swayed in the wind just overhead. I clumsily got up onto my feet and backed away from the entrance to the cave. The creature never emerged from the darkness of its subterranean lair. The rest of the team hurried through the brush and found me in complete shock. I told them that I found the family down in the cave. I told them that something was down there. It wasn't long after this that armed policemen and park rangers went down there and found the remains of the family, but there was no sign of what killed them. I quit the very next day. This happened when I was about 18 years old. I was big into running back then, and lived in a town that was a suburb but had lots of farms around, as in smallish tomato and strawberry fields, not huge never-ending wheat fields. I preferred running on the dirt at the edges of those fields because it was a lot easier on my legs than running long distance on concrete or asphalt, and I was usually training for half marathons. It's about 13.1 miles for those who aren't insane enough to think running is fun. This particular day, I was planning to run an easy 6 miles. I told my mum and she suggested I do a loop and meet them back at the dog park about 3 miles from my house as my halfway point. This is the pre-cell phone era, when all the craziest shit went down. But being careful, I took a walkie-talkie my dad always used, and my mum took the other one. Now, the walkie-talkie had a range longer than the ones that my brothers and I played around with when we were younger, but it definitely did not work 3 miles away, and I honestly had no idea what its exact range was. So, I take off on my run. I'm planning to go on the sidewalk for a little bit until I get to the fields. I think it was lettuce or something then, but short small plants. I'm running in the dirt with the road a few yards to my left. I have to run south and then turn right into a slightly smaller, less traveled road to get to the dog park. As I'm running on the first part, my parents drive by, and, being dorks, they honk and wave and yell at me. I wave and then soon after make my turn into the smaller road. This road is a small flat dirt one with small drainage ditches, a forever lettuce field, and then a wall that backs onto the backyards of some houses. I start noticing how quiet this street is and how few cars are passing me. Then I randomly start thinking to myself, if someone tried to do something to me, I could run to those houses. But they're quite far away, so I don't know if I would make it. Just as I'm in the middle of thinking this, I hear a car, but this one doesn't pass me like the other ones did. I hear it slow down so that it's behind me, just out of my peripheral vision. My senses go super alert and I immediately realize what a dumbass I was to pick this route because I'm stuck out here with no one to help me and nowhere to hide. The car starts speeding up enough so it's next to me, and I glance over and see a man. He's middle-aged, white, dark hair, totally normal looking, but I get a chill down my spine immediately. He sort of leans over into the passenger seat and says in a super sweet voice, "Hi, where are you going? Do you need a ride?" I am scared and realize that this is not good. Admittedly, nothing has happened yet, and he could be totally innocently just wanting to chat, but my intuition is in overdrive telling me that I am not safe. I hop over the ditch thinking at least that will make it harder for his car to follow me if I need to take off across the field to try and make it to those houses in the distance. And this pisses him off. He guns it and gets closer to the ditch and in front of where I am, and then he says in a voice that I can only describe as bone-chillingly evil, "You know, you shouldn't be out here all alone. Something horrible could happen to you out here, and no one would ever know where to find you." He has put his car in park and is taking off his seatbelt when I remember the walkie-talkie. The piece of crap is all staticky because I'm too far away, so I immediately turn down the volume and say loudly, "Hey Dad, yeah, I see your car. I'm over here by this red Buick. Do you see me?" And I fake wave to no one. There was no car coming from the direction my parents were, and when I had started talking, there was no one behind us either. But by the grace of the universe, at that exact moment a car turned onto the road. The guy saw it, looked at me, and sped off so fast he left skid marks. I have never run faster in my life, and I was looking behind me every few seconds and thought he'd be waiting for me at every intersection I had to cross. I was shaking, I was so scared, and relieved when I got to that fucking dog park. I told my parents everything and my mum called the cops. They took a statement but said that there wasn't actually much that they could do because nothing had really happened. But the weird part was that I was having trouble getting my story out because I was so upset. And before I gave a description of the car, the cop asked me, "Hey, was it a red Buick?" He wouldn't tell us why, but that just added to my feeling that I had narrowly escaped something awful.